Hello, and welcome to this edition of Faith to Live By. I'm Pam Christian, your host and truth advocate, each and every week, where I help us explore current events from a biblical and prophetic perspective, so we, as God's children, can know how He wants us to respond in partnership with Him to see His kingdom will done on earth as it is in heaven. I want to thank you so very much for joining me today, and I sincerely hope you have been with me with my recent podcasts, because I honestly believe these to be among some of the most important for all the citizens of the world. We have come to a point in the evil efforts by proponents for a one-world government where they nearly accomplished their goals, beginning with the nation of Canada. The globalists have been at work for decades seeking to accomplish their goals to have Canada be the first nation state, while also grooming other nations to quickly become additional nation states under their control. The warning signs seen in Canada can be seen in many other world nations, including the United States. However, as the people of these nations have been waking up to truth and resisting this evil agenda, foremost by calling out to God to rescue us, we are seeing the faithfulness of God and the restoration of hope. God is responding to the prayers of His remnant to rescue and restore the nations whose people want to be restored and aligned with God and His ways. People are realizing the path of death and destruction we've been on, and we're finally waking up, resisting evil, and running toward righteousness. History is replete with people falling away from God and His ways over time, resulting in experiencing the ramifications of their own choices apart from God. However, when the people willingly choose to turn from their evil ways and to call out to God, God is immediately faithful to rescue them. And we, dear people, are alive at a time in all the history of the world where God is conducting the greatest rescue mission, second only to the first coming of Jesus Christ. I ask you to consider your actual experiences of the past 5 years in the nation where you live. I ask you to consider the propaganda of mainstream media that is controlled by the globalists, in stark contrast to the content you hear on programs such as mine. I ask you to use your own critical thinking skills to decide for yourself what makes the most sense, what seems to be the truth about the times in which we live. Then I ask you to decide for yourself with whom and what you want to be personally aligned, to decide what you will fight for on behalf of you and your loved ones. Please allow the content of this podcast, which is part 2 of my session with Grant Abraham, the leader of the United Party of Canada, who has been working to help people discover the truth so they can choose to reject the lies and deception that have been leading to their enslavement and ways of death, so instead they would choose the way of freedom and the way of life. Because of the urgency of this content with Canada's upcoming election, I will hold my usual announcements to the end of this program, wanting you to give your undivided attention to the words and heart of my guest. Picking up where I left off last week, here is part 2 of my time with Grant Abraham. What I now want to transition to is understanding the impact you've been able to make among the Canadians, and are you really influencing the upcoming elections? And do you even have elections, or are they selections like we've seen here in the United States?
Well, that final question, I don't know. I'm hoping that we still have elections. We do have paper ballots still in Canada on a federal election, but I'm told that they're tabulated by machines, and who knows what happens when that paper gets put into the machine and whether the right number comes out. So I'm trusting that there is legitimacy to the election. I'm going to be running. Canada has approximately 340 seats, and in order to become the prime minister, you need to win about 175 of them, let's say, for easy math. And for us right now, we're a very new party that really just crystallized our official status this time last year, February of last year. And we'll be running somewhere right now, it looks like between 20 and 30 candidates, which which isn't enough if we want all of them for me to become prime minister. But it is enough for us to be very influential in the event that there was a minority government position where one of the parties didn't necessarily get the total number of seats that they needed. We could be king makers or king breakers in terms of the maths, depending on what the outcomes were. So the point is, though, I think that really it's a case of giving a lot of frustrated Canadians an alternative to the two mainstream parties that we are becoming aware and learning. Canadians are learning that they are essentially the same. Those two parties are two wings of the same bird. They're both globalist driven policy parties, and people are waking up, particularly this last 6 months. They're seeing the response to the Americans, and they're scratching their head and going, why would the Conservative Party take that position? Or why aren't we dealing with foreign interference? Or why didn't the Conservative Party challenge this issue of what does post-nationalism mean, or what does a reset mean? And so when I talk to Canadians, I'll say to them, what the Liberal Party, the equivalent of the Democratic Party in Canada, is committing, or what they're doing by commission of acts, the Conservatives and name only party are doing by omission to act. They're failing to confront. And at some point, I went on my journey because I was a part of that party. I found myself going, okay, well, maybe they don't see it. Maybe they don't understand what's going on. Maybe they're lazy, or maybe they're really lazy. And then it became, look, there's no way that they can't be seeing this. They're just negligent and not confronting it. And then I moved in my spectrum to, well, no, they're actually being reckless or irresponsible in their duty to the nation. And then I finally ended up with a real position that they weren't just being reckless; they were complicit. And that's kind of where I've arrived at now. And I simply say they're failing the people of this country because they're not engaging it. So that's how easy it can happen. I mean, the undermining really of the people of this nation, there's a lot of forces. There's this ideological reality that I've told you about with this committee and what they're doing in terms of rethinking or reimagining what our values are, so that they call the kind of normal thinking that Canadians or Americans would have about how their country should function. They call it being almost like a blind spot. And then we have a lot of foreign interference that maybe we'll see in the next 3 or 4 years, whether it's working in league with this agenda to undermine the sovereignty of the Canadian people. So the book that I wrote, The Battle for the Soul of Canada, deals with a lot of these issues. I read it recently myself again, and I was encouraged because a lot of the stuff that I wrote, when I wrote it in the spring of 23, a lot of those pieces that I wrote are more true now and more relevant now than they were then. So this is a very important election, and I think that we're working very hard to re-educate Canadians for them to see that in some ways what President Trump is doing is shaking the Canadian infrastructure to begin to see the fact that we have two parties that are both compromising on against the Canadian people, and we'll have to just watch this closely. And there is an awakening going on, and whether it's there's time or whatever, we'll have to see. We'll have to see. Mm-hmm. But there's patriots in the country who aren't just prepared to allow this country to go. And I suppose in some ways, many of them might say that they've given up on a political process. And my view is we need to have a legitimate expression of government, even in the event if we have to move towards declaring parts of Canada to be self-determining, or to move to a declaration of independence. And so there are real geopolitical pressures. It's not just politics, normal politics in Canada talking about tax or social policy. There are pressures because the American position is a geopolitical position. President Trump is saying you will be Americans before you're anything else. In other words, if you don't, I think what President Trump's saying is you will not be a post nation state that is an instability or threat to our continent because you either are hosting migrants, illegal migrants that could be weaponized or militarized, or because you host Chinese troops in the country. We're not going to allow that to happen. So now Canada is really needing to see and understand that we're dealing with geopolitics in the country now as much as we are dealing with politics. So we've got China's interests, we've got foreign influence from India and China. There's a established understanding that there's Chinese troops in Canada. They were allowed in to ostensibly protect Chinese state investments in property or businesses in the country, but they're here. The Americans know that they're here. We've got a very, without boring you about Canadian, kind of some of the Canadian nuances, we've got a very strong separation movement going on right now in Western Canada because Western Canada was really set up as a colony of a colony. It was set up to support Ontario and Quebec, and the people in Western Canada are fed up doing that. Alberta alone, the province of Alberta, has sent nearly $1 trillion from Alberta to Ontario and Quebec since 1960. And so we're subsidizing the lunacy that's actually unraveling the framework of the country that we love and a lot of other Canadians love that live across the country. So there are the country's heaving with frustration across numbers of these issues, whether it's intellectual with the discussion about Agenda 2030 or now geopolitical, or the internal separation discussions with Quebec and or now Western Canada. So it's a fascinating time. I mean, Canada's been pretty sleepy and quiet since World War II, but there are sea changes coming to this nation. Sea changes.
Grant, you talked about people in your government who are complicit. And I couldn't help but wonder what kind of delusion, what kind of mind washing would be going on that would allow people to be complicit?
I don't know. I think that there's agendas that play out. I think there's people that are maybe acting in ways that are, they've been shaped by their education that's different maybe than it would have been 40 years ago. There's a lot of foreign money that's coming into the country that is, buying influence. And, that's creating an influence that is shaping policy, and we'll talk about George Soros, investing money into different organizations that create narratives that appear to be relevant but are actually almost paid for demonstrations like Black Lives Matter or others like that that are designed to destabilize. I do think that at the upper echelons of this there is what I call this human membrane of evil that is working towards the weakening of these strong nations that are value based. And this is, in a sense, it's war. And, so when we talk about the deep state, does everybody understand the full playbook? I don't think so. And there's so many different angles that are being developed and shaped and influences made that there's a kind of a net shift happening without anybody kind of arriving at the awareness, hey, we're going off the rails here. They're just doing their job. Their boss tells them they're doing a good job, et cetera, et cetera. And yet there's a think tank sitting with a bunch of civil servants that some of them are elective, some of them are career civil servants, and they're redesigning the country and they're being paid for secretly by the federal government. So there is intent. There are masterminds, and there are all kinds of good people doing what they're told, maybe without thinking. And that, from a historical point of view, that's what we need to learn from the Nuremberg trials. People. It's not okay just to say I was given an order to do this, right? People actually have to say, hey, what you're doing is wrong. It's just like that lady who was the whistleblower who brought these documents out. She kind of was gripped by that reality of recognizing that what she was actually working on was counterproductive to the existence of the country. And she all of a sudden, when she saw it, she put on the kind of let's say those glasses that would allow her to scrutinize all these disparate actions. She could suddenly see that what she was doing was counterproductive.
And this is what we need. We need more people to wake up to critical thinking. And I so applaud you and those who are working with you to doing just that, to waking people up, not only in Canada, but around the world. Because as we said, the design was that Canada would be the first post-nation state. That means that they want many others. And there are nations around the world today that are suffering some of the same plights you just explained Canadians are suffering. Grant, in closing, because you do have your election coming up, I think it's the end of April, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah.
What would you like to share then? Because I really want this podcast to impact Canadians. I want this particular recording to get into the ears and the minds and the lives of the Canadian people. So, what would you like to say in closing?
I think what I want to say is well, two things. First of all, in the leadership race within the Liberal Party that Mark Carney just won to become the leader of the Liberal Party, and by extension, Prime Minister, he arrived at a conclusion with Chrystia Freeland that Canada would become a part of the New World Order and that would be our protection and ally. And she made this comment, and then Mark Carney, they actually agreed with each other in this debate. And Mark Carney said to her, yeah, I would agree with that. I'd align with that, with one exception. The New World Order is what we need to put Canada into, but now the United States is no longer a part of that. So Canada needs to become a subset of the New World Order, excluding the United States. Now, that's a shocking declaration in our media of the actual intent to say we're going to be a part of a new world order. Well, what does that really mean? No one really knows. And yet, because of the media frenzy or whatever, and this is the message for Canadians, is there are diabolical plans at work here to actually rob us of our heritage, our culture, our values, our traditions, our national identity, our freedom, our understanding of property and wealth and security in terms of generational blessing in this country. Those are being stolen right now. And if you just listen at the kind of skin level, the superficial level to our Canadian politics, you will be doing what we've always done, which is giving it 10 minutes of interest before we go out the door. But actually, the stakes are immensely high right now, and you cannot look and think about this Canadian election from the same muscle memory that you've used your whole lifetime or that your parents have used. It's really a time to look deeper at what's going on and understand that now we're seeing that people are waking up and they're knowing that there's a deeper strategy, a malicious strategy at work to actually thieve and steal what the best of this nation is about, and that is the discussion about post-nationalism. We're seeing the emergence of responses of political parties that are speaking to the grassroots of the people. We're seeing it in the UK with Nigel Farage. We're seeing it in France with Marine Le Pen, who is completely speaking to the French people against this globalist agenda. If you're watching what's going on, I got some intel from interesting places. I mean, the United States just moved 35,000 troops, as I understand it, from Germany down to Hungary. Hungary is led by Viktor Orban. Viktor Orban is the prime minister of Hungary, who is speaking the same language about valuing the Hungarian people. He talks about giving the nation a horizon line that is based on Christian values, because that allows them to be able to say yes or no to things based on a value framework. In many ways, I'm having that same conversation in Canada, is that we've lost the ability to say no to some things because we're saying yes to everything, because we've disconnected our value framework from the supremacy of God and the rule of law. And it's not about, shoving religion down anybody's throat. It's about saying the supremacy of God and the rule of law. It has allowed us to understand that our values are plugged into something that allow us to maintain and sustain our culture, values, and traditions. And I always say this when I talk to Canadians. I'll say, since we've moved away from our understanding of the supremacy of God and the rule of law in our Constitution, are we more free or are we less free? And 15 years ago, when we had a clearer understanding of our values emanating from the supremacy of God and the rule of law, we were much more free and less controlled. And we didn't have our government, beating down crowds at the convoy protest or freezing bank accounts because they felt threatened. And that would have been unheard of before. So there are significant changes, and what we're doing is we're running candidates across the party, across the nation, not not everywhere, only a percentage, maybe 10% of the seats, but we're standing for the principles that will actually ensure the continuation of this nation as a free nation, and the security and wealth of the people, so that this nation can fulfill its actual destiny and purpose and be secure and strong. And so, it really is a significant election, and we'll see what happens, because we've never had these geopolitical forces being talked about like this before globally. And what President Trump's doing in terms of doging, these systems. That's what Canada needs. And I actually think we've had a broken system in this country. And from a policy perspective, I would say we now need to lose the British crown as our head of state. We need to move to a constitutional republic, and we need to make the people of Canada the sovereign, so that we understand that there is, this relationship of values flowing from God, people, and then government, and not the other way around. And in our conversations across the country, people are resonating and seeing that we have a deep cellular issue in terms of how we're thinking about and processing through the structure of our nation, and it's emerging. So whether this issue now plays out in this election in 3 weeks or 3.5 weeks from now, or doesn't, I don't know the answer to that. But I think that it's the beginning of a conversation where people are saying this is how we want to live, and they're coming into a maturing understanding of these issues that I've touched on today: the threat and the stakes, and what we've allowed to lapse in our thinking and been lazy, distracted, and returning back to the core principles and values that have built the country. And it's not often in established democracies that new parties emerge and can undertake massive transition. However, and I often will say to Canadians, really, in the natural, our situation has gone too far, and there really isn't a political situation, because in Canada now we have a two-tier policing. We have a democratic process that seems to be deeply frustrated and not working, is the subject of foreign interference. We have a prime minister who appoints our governor general, who's the representative of the Queen. And that's the only person that can actually unravel government and fix it, but they won't because they've been hired by the prime minister. And so we have a very broken system. And I think this is where people of Christian faith need to look and ask themselves, what what kind of faith are we going to have? Are we going to be just like that story? Are we going to be part of the 10 spies that looked at the promises that were over the nation that they were to steward, and say we can't do it because the giants are too big, or the walls are too high, or they're too thick? We just can't do it. Or are they going to have faith like the two spies and say, you know what, there are giants, the walls of those cities are big, they are thick, but it's our destiny to steward, and with God we can do this. And we have a line in our national anthem, God keep our land glorious and free, and people sing it every time we sing the national anthem. And now we need to return to the bedrock values that built this nation and make it a prayer again, and recognize that God has a providential hand in the interest of this nation. And where there's two spies that can say, with God we can do it, I have faith and hope that God can change the nation in a day. But we know in all of these travails that face us, whether it's war or human challenge, it takes people to show up and allow then God's hand to move. And in that sense, that's what this is for Canada.
Grant, I can't thank you enough for being so completely articulate to help people who hear this podcast really have an enhanced understanding of the truth. That's what we all want, is to live on the basis of truth. I can't thank you enough, and I would like very much to check with you early May to find out more of what's happened and what your take will be on things after the election.
For sure. Thank you for the time. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. You heard Grant speak of the frustration Canadians have with their two parties, since what was the Conservative Party has clearly moved to the Liberal perspective. Grant even referred to the two parties as being two wings of the same bird. This perspective was echoed in a recent news article by Conservative strategist Jamie Ellerton, who said, quote, "The Conservative Pierre Poilievre would need to show empathy for ordinary voters in his debate appearances. For Pierre to close the deal and get the results the Conservative Party wants in this election, he needs to speak to the anxieties that Canadians are facing." End quote. The Liberal-controlled media in Canada is essentially ignoring the advances Grant Abraham and the United Party of Canada has made in the minds and hope of conservative Canadians, because conservatism is entirely opposed to modern-day liberalism. We must understand what liberalism has become if we want to live in truth. As with all things, over time, they morph and change, and what it means to be a liberal today, or progressive, as the proponents prefer now, is not what it once was. At this point, I'm asking you to consider how both conservative and liberal perspectives are more than political or social ideals today. They are also religious philosophies. Now, I offer my own considered opinions with the data I've explored so far, and I ask you to consider my perspectives for yourself. I believe there was a time when Western countries were largely Christian-focused, with both liberal and conservative Christians weighing in on political and governmental matters. Today, the liberal perspective seems to have moved away from being Christian-centric to embracing religious pluralism. However, not everyone who maintains the liberal or progressive perspective realizes this departure. According to a quick internet search, definitions of the two positions are: traditional or classic conservatism is a political and social philosophy that emphasizes the importance of transcendent moral principles manifested through certain posited natural laws to which it is claimed society should adhere. Traditional or classical liberalism believes in equality and individual liberty, supporting private property and individual rights, and recognizing the importance of related values such as pluralism, toleration, autonomy, bodily integrity, and consent. Now, reducing these two popular modern-day definitions. Conservatism points to natural laws, which includes a natural lawgiver to which society should adhere. Liberalism points to equality and individual liberty, including pluralism and toleration, which elevates human preferences over divine revelation. Now, I know there are many people who consider themselves liberal and they believe in the God of the Bible. However, I want you to understand the built-in conflict. Modern-day liberalism supports many issues that are entirely contrary to what the God of the Judeo-Christian Bible has revealed, including fornication, divorce, adultery, homosexuality, abortion, transgenderism, and much more. Somewhere along the way, and I believe it started with the 19th century period of enlightenment, as I address in my book, Examine Your Faith, Finding Truth in a World of Lies, liberalism began moving away from divine revelation to elevating human reasoning. Next, we have to wonder how modern-day liberalism has been so successful in influencing people away from the basic tenets of the Christian faith as revealed by God in all of nature and in the Bible. I believe it's largely been through contrived arguments that include slander, ridicule, and shame of people for what liberals declare to be lack of compassion. This, in my opinion, is the liberals' favorite and most successful method to sway public opinion and advance their agenda. Consider the slander of being called a conspiracy theorist, or a homophobe, or intolerant, as just 3 examples liberals have used to overpower conservatives. Once the liberals got enough people aligned with the idea of lack of compassion, the slander against conservatives is turned to ridicule and then shame. Modern-day liberals may believe the God of the Bible exists, but based on all else they openly proclaim, they do not accept God as being supreme. Instead, they believe God's revealed standards need to adjust over time. Liberals believe truth is subjective and relative. Conservatives believe truth is objective and absolute, and there is only one true God as revealed in all of nature and in the Bible. In short, modern-day liberalism is a belief system that opposes Judeo-Christian values and the God of that belief system. And this has been openly and widely heralded by modern-day globalists who want to make Canada their first nation state. Modern-day liberalism is not at all the same as it was for our parents or grandparents. In fact, I believe the modern term progressive is another evidence of the departure this belief system has taken from what it once was. It seems to me, in the momentum of the changes of what once was the liberal point of view that included God, it has become necessary for the conservative perspective to essentially double down and make certain God is not rejected, but instead greatly magnified. I implore Canadians and people of other nations where proponents of a one-world government have made significant inroads to seriously consider the path your liberal leaders have revealed they want for you and your nation, in contrast to what you want for your personal lives and for that of your family and loved ones. Examine the issues your candidates promote in light of objective truth and not in light of their progressive claims that appeal to our debased carnal nature or tend to shame us into compliance. Use critical thinking skills and consider the logical conclusion for the path they want to take you on. Then act on your best considered conclusions, knowing your actions will either be for the benefit or the detriment of yourself and future generations. The election in Canada is right around the corner. As a Christian, I am praying for my Canadian brothers and sisters, asking God to intervene on behalf of his people, no matter how small in numbers the Christian remnant in Canada may be, that his will is done on earth as it is in heaven for his people in Canada and around the world. Next week, April 30th already, golly. Well, we'll have lots to talk about, and I'm pleased to announce Amanda Grace will be my guest. I'm looking forward to talking with her about all she's seen prophetically regarding the time from Purim, which was in March, through Passover, which just concluded April 20th. and how events have come to pass in the establishing of these prophecies. Now I ask you to please listen to my closing announcements and to take advantage of the many goods and services I bring you in an effort to at least cover the costs of this podcast. The first announcement clarifies more about the changes to our Greece tour now scheduled for April 2026, and I really want you to be able to join us, so please listen carefully and send me the email to save your place. It may seem far off, but most people make plans for a significant vacation about a year in advance. So if you haven't already expressed interest in traveling with us in April 2026, now is the time to do so. We want to have about 30 people total because this size group works best for the specific tour I have in mind. We'll be walking the footsteps of the Apostle Paul. I'm using the time between now and October 2025 to determine if we have enough interest, and the trend indicates we definitely should. We have just about 30 people on the list now, but I'd like to have more because when it comes to the actual day of making a commitment, things could have changed, and I want to be able to have at least 30 actually attend the tour. So if you think you'd like to be part of the Faith to Live By Christian tour with me in Greece during April 2026, now's the time to get your name and number in your party on the list. There's no obligation at this point. You're just expressing your interest. Attendees need to arrange their own air travel to and from the Athens International Airport. To get your name on the list, send an email to faithtoliveby@PamelaChristianMinistries.com with the word Greece in the subject line. In the body of the email, provide your name, contact information, and number of people you expect to be in your party. This will place your name on the interested in attending list, but does not obligate you in any way. It merely assures you have first right of refusal when down payments are due. If you didn't get the details written down that I just shared, simply visit my Beyond the Podcast page using the link in the show notes. If you like what you hear from me with this podcast, I highly recommend my book series, my award-winning blog, and consider signing up for my certificate course in apologetics. My aim with that course is to help people learn how not only to use apologetics to share truth with others, but to help Christian leaders incorporate apologetics into their respective ministries so more Christians are learning how to share their faith. You can learn more by using the link in the show notes. For now, I offer my weekly podcasts, my blog, and bi-monthly e-newsletter at no cost. And certainly I have hard costs associated with doing all I do. If you've been blessed by my work and would like to help my work reach others, why not consider partnering with me? For as little as $10 a month, you can become a partner. Then together we can reach even more people for Jesus. Simply visit my Pamela Christian Ministries homepage and then click on the Give button at the top menu bar. Or if you prefer, you can go directly to the Give page using the link in the show notes. To become a partner, you can use my PayPal or Venmo account, but you will also see other ways you can support my work on that page. Whether you choose to become a monthly partner, give a one-time donation, purchase my books and products from my web store, or support my affiliate sponsors, anything you can do to help me continue this work would be greatly appreciated. And as always, your prayers and telling others about me and my ministry work is much needed. When it comes to my selection of affiliate sponsors, I first look for Christian-owned and operated businesses, and I make a point of personally using the products or services so I can fully endorse them. I seek sponsors that offer products or services you can get via the internet worldwide, and I specifically consider what is common to most people universally. So you'll find health, beauty, and wellness products through Dr. Zelenko's Z-Stack supplements, and from Operation Tomahawk, and from QE Strong. Dr. Zelenko's Z-Stack supplements are truly amazing and are available to my listeners for a 5% discount per purchase or a 10% discount for a monthly subscription using the promo code FTLB. Operation Tomahawk is a membership purchase program with an American-owned and operated company offering personal and household care products that are not made of toxins or genetically modified ingredients. Stop buying national brands from corporations that are part of the deep state cabal. Use the link in the show notes, and from the drop-down menu under How Did You Hear About Us, select Pamela Christian, Faith to Live By. You may have heard my interview with Rob Renee about QE Strong. Discover the benefits of quantum energy to overcome all sorts of ailments. Visit QEstrong.com and use the promo code FTLB at checkout to receive your discount. Then my newest affiliate I'm really excited to bring you is Q Streaming. That's CUE Streaming Television. People with United States addresses can get over 3,000 channels, including live TV with streaming television without a contract. Get all of your local networks and favorite movie and sports and pay-per-view channels for about half of what cable costs. See the video promo link in the show notes to learn more. Affiliate sponsors only provide financial support to me when you purchase what they offer. So before you support Amazon or any other retailer, if I offer what you're looking for, please purchase through me. When it comes to special occasions, birthdays, or Christmas gifts, consider my books, jewelry, CDs, and more from my web store or any of the affiliate goods and services I offer. When you purchase from my web store, be sure to use the promo code TRUTH, TRUTH, to receive a 20% discount. Again, you'll find all the links in the show notes. If you like the content and resource material I bring you with this podcast, you'll find much more by connecting with me through my blog. In fact, my blog has been awarded 2 unsolicited awards for Christian content. And I'm also very active on social media. I can cover much more on social media than I can with this weekly podcast. And if you're not already subscribed, please subscribe to my complimentary bi-monthly e-newsletter. I offer encouragement, special offers, and one of my signature recipes with each and every edition. Yep, I'm a foodie and I love to entertain, which is why Faith, Family, Friends, and Food is a bonus segment of my bi-monthly e-newsletter. To receive even more, please be sure to check out my dedicated podcast listeners page, Beyond the Podcast. Here's where we can connect exclusively and you can download complimentary devotionals, resources, and more. On that page, I also ask you to help me learn more about you and what you want by completing the form visible once you scroll down that page. And something that is very easy for you to do and would mean a lot to me is for you to rate, subscribe, or comment on this podcast according to what your preferred listening platform allows. You know how it works. The more likes and subscriptions to this podcast, the more opportunity we have to expand the listening audience. And that means we can reach more people with the gospel message of Jesus while helping people learn how to better apply their Christian faith. I hope you'll join me next week and tell your friends and family to listen right here on Faith to Live By, where we learn how to gain spiritual victory over life's issues. Until next week, I'm Pam Christian, asking you to remember Christ died for us. The least we can do is live for Him.